Will Desmond Ridder get his revenge as the Falcons and Raiders both look to snap their losing streaks?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Raiders. And of course, Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app, use code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. And I am joined, of course, by the Locked On Raiders illustrious host, none other than your boy Q. And today we are going to be previewing this Week 15 matchup between the Falcons and Raiders, and we'll be looking at both teams' big stories, key matchups, and keys to victory. But we thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of both of our podcasts, Locked On Falcons and Locked On Raiders. And if you want to become an everydayer, which means you make these illustrious shows your first listen and first watch each and every day, all you have to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. So, Q, my friend, I don't think we've done a show since the Falcons made a Bryan Edwards trade 2 years ago. You know,
that's right. I forgot about that. It's been a minute, man. It's been a minute. How did that work out for the Falcons?
Before we get into like this game, and just catch up a little bit, and what's going on in your neck of the woods? I know the Raiders aren't doing great, but how are you doing?
Well, hey, man, look, I'm doing fantastic. I'm living the dream. And I'll say this, man. I mean, even though the Raiders are having a terrible season, there's never a dull moment. There's always something going on. And, you know, obviously with this game coming up on Monday, there's, you know, an intriguing storyline. You know, can Desmond Ridder end up being the starting quarterback and face his former team in the Atlanta Falcons? That's just one of the many storylines that we could see in this game coming up on Monday. So pretty excited about it, man. How's things going on with you in the ATL?
It's the same, Q. You know, the Falcons are never boring. They're always doing something interesting, even if it's not necessarily good. So that is basically what's going on in Atlanta. And, you know, we'll be talking about the Falcons' old quarterback later in the episode. But let's talk about the Falcons' new quarterback in Kirk Cousins, who the big story for this Falcon team is this sort of the final straw for Kirk Cousins and final start for Kirk Cousins, you know, with a potential bounce back game. I thought he took a step in the right direction last week against Minnesota. The stat line still doesn't look great. He still hasn't thrown a touchdown in 4 games. He's had 8 interceptions in the last 2 games, 2 last week against Minnesota. A little bit better than the 4 he had against the Chargers. So we're making steady progress, Q, in the right direction. Maybe we'll get down to 1 over 0 this week. But, you know, basically, if he doesn't perform better this week, it's really going to be hard to justify retaining him in the lineup, especially going up against this Raiders team that's on a 9-game losing streak. You know, facing a Raiders defense that's like dead last in the NFL in takeaways. And, you know, if he's turning the ball over to this Raiders team, that's going to be a problem. But then again, you saw last week, Baker Mayfield, you know, gave the ball away a little bit and played a sort of sloppy performance that watching the film, it kind of reminded me of how Kirk Cousins has played the last couple of weeks with, you know, missing some throws and not necessarily looking comfortable. But it's going to be tough. You know, what's this, you know, do you feel like this is a game that the Raiders are sort of chomping at the bit with that sort of turnover situation there?
Yeah, it's funny, and I was talking to some of the players in the locker room on Wednesday about turnovers. K'Lavon Chaisson, a guy that, you know, actually created a nice interception on Sunday against Tampa Bay, batted it up in the ball, and as he's fallen to his backside, catches it on the way down. And I said, okay, the Raiders don't create turnovers, but they had 3, and it all started after that interception. He said they all happen in snowballs. So they're thinking that they're going to be able to come out there and create some turnovers. And we know, as you mentioned, Kirk Cousins has thrown interceptions, those 8 interceptions as opposed to no touchdowns as of late. And so I think that they're going to go hunting. They're going to go try to get the ball. Obviously, it's easier said than done. But, you know, once you're coming off a game where you did see that kind of production defensively, you got to feel pretty good about yourself and your opportunity, especially when the guy that's going to be throwing the rock is, you know, struggling. And I'll say this, I don't know how much he's really struggling, but he is turning the ball over. But I don't feel like, Aaron, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I still don't feel like he's healthy. right? Seeing him in the pistol all the time. He's not a pistol quarterback, but he's in that formation all the time. He doesn't seem like, and I had someone tell this to me on Wednesday. He said, Q, it looks like when Kirk Cousins is throwing the ball, he looks like a basketball player whose legs are gone. Right, his jumpers are the balls bouncing off the front of the iron, and I thought that's a really good description. But I want to run it by you. Is he healthy where he needs to be at this stage of the game?
It looked like he was making progress a couple of weeks ago. We saw like a scramble like back in week 8 against Tampa Bay, and it was like, oh, okay, like maybe he's getting back. There was a scramble last week for 11 yards. I think it got wiped out by a penalty. And so like you see these moments where he's moving around a little bit better. Kirk was never really the most mobile quarterback in the league. He was one of the mobile quarterbacks in the league prior to the injury. So you knew it was going to be an issue this season. But yeah, like it's really been an issue with the footwork, and sort of not being able to drive the football as well as he needs to. And I think overall, like it's just an overall discomfort that, I don't know if it's as much to do with the injury and just sort of being in a new offense and not doing a lot of the things, as you mentioned, with the pistol stuff and traditionally being an under center quarterback, not doing a lot of the things that he's comfortable and has been comfortable doing for a very long time in the NFL. So I think it paints an overall picture of a quarterback that's not particularly comfortable. And I certainly don't think the injury issue helps in that regard. And it's led to, him being basically a statue in the pocket that when he's had to move and whatnot. And, I'm looking at a player like Maxx Crosby and I'm like, that's not a guy that you want. You're going to need to be able to move off your spot, because he will definitely move you off your spot. And so that is my worry this week, which is, do the Falcons have a good plan for Maxx Crosby? They haven't really faced a pass rusher like of his caliber since week 1. They did not have a good plan for TJ Watt. And I'm curious to sort of see how this Falcons team matches up. I like the matchups that the Falcons have on the outside at the skill positions against this Raiders secondary, but it's not going to matter if Maxx Crosby's getting home.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. And Max is, not quite necessarily having the Maxx Crosby type season that he's accustomed to. A little bit of that had to do with the high ankle sprain he suffered in week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens, but he's starting to round into form. He looks like he's a lot healthier now than he was earlier in the season. So you're starting to see him get a lot of more pressure on the quarterbacks, and you're seeing other guys from the cornerback position get to the quarterback. You're seeing, guys like a K'Lavon Chaisson, who I mentioned, he's getting home. Tyree Wilson is all of a sudden starting to surround the quarterback. Like other guys, Adam Butler from the interior is starting to make life miserable. Trayvon Merrick from the back end playing real close to the line of scrimmage as of late. So he's been able to, get some pressure on the quarterback. So they're coming from all over, and it's going to be interesting in that little chess match to see how Kirk Cousins, who, as you mentioned, is not a guy that's going to be moving around the pocket a lot, really is kind of a statue, how that matches up and how the Raiders can try to get after him and disrupt him. But as you mentioned, they have the weapons, right? Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. I've been a big Bijan fan since he was at the University of Texas. I know what he could bring to the table. Running backs behind him are good as well. I mean, there's a lot of weapons there in Atlanta to like. As far as the defense goes, though, Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded head coach. How has things been going with him so far, and what's that defense looking like?
Well, the defense has been a bright spot looking specifically at the pass rush, right? They've had 9 sacks in the last 2 games after only having 10 sacks in their first 11 games this year. And basically, if everybody wasn't talking about benching Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix, that would be the big story in Atlanta. We'd be celebrating in the streets if the team was performing a little bit better. Unfortunately, last week, the secondary got exposed by Minnesota's weapons. So they're going to definitely need a bounce back week this week. And I think that's going to, obviously the Raiders aren't having the sort of plethora of weapons that maybe Minnesota has, but they have one very good weapon in Brock Bowers. And I'll be very curious to see how the Falcons handle that matchup, because essentially Bowers has been a slot receiver for them. I don't know if the Falcons want to necessarily put a nickel cornerback on him. D. Alford got absolutely destroyed last week. Their nickel corner against that Vikings receiver group. Do they play more big nickel? And does that mean, say, someone like Richie Grant, who's barely played this year and hasn't been that effective when he's been on the field, gets more opportunities in that role? Is this a game where they put Troy Anderson out there? They're a very athletic linebacker, but it'll be interesting to see how that chess match goes with. I know the Raiders have kind of morphed into a 2 tight end offense under Scott Turner. And that will likely lead to the Falcons playing a lot of base, but they like to have their linebacker Nate Lamon play in their base defense while Troy Anderson plays in their nickel defense or when they're in dime. And Nate Landman's a really bad coverage player. And if that's the case, if he's going to play out there when they're having Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers out on the field, I think the Raiders could really potentially exploit that matchup. And so I'll be curious to see if the Falcons basically put Nate Landman aside and actually ask Troy Anderson to be a full-time player this week for really the first time since week 4 of the season, since he's been battling some injuries over most of the season. So that to me is going to be a big matchup for this Falcons defense. But if they can get home with the pass rush as they have the last couple of weeks, that will certainly slow down Brock Bowers, because obviously the quarterback can't, make passes from his backside, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And yeah, I know we'll do keys to victory later on in the show, but yeah, one of those keys to victory for Atlanta will definitely be locate 89 and don't let him wreck the game. He is fantastic. His rookie year has been phenomenal. I knew he was really good coming out of Georgia. I didn't know he was going to be this stinking good. I mean, he has been all that and then some, to the point where there's real conversations about him being the offensive rookie of the year, not Jaden Daniels, not Bo Nix, but potentially Brock Bowers on a 2-win Raiders team. Like, think about that for a minute. That's pretty stinking impressive. That's how good he's been. So, yeah, that's going to be a fun matchup to see how Atlanta decides they want to defend against Brock Bowers. And, well, I know we'll talk coming up about what quarterback's going to be playing, and it may be a guy that you are very familiar with in Desmond Ridder, who was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons.
Absolutely. So we'll see which quarterback the Falcons will be hoping to put on their backside, whether it's going to be Desmond Ridder or Aidan O'Connell, as we turn our attention to the big stories for the Las Vegas Raiders on today's Crossover Thursday. And get ready to tackle more NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app is going to give you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page that you place your bets. And if you're going to place a bet on this upcoming Week 15 matchup between the Falcons and Raiders, the Falcons are favored by 3.5 points. I think that line has moved in the Raiders' direction over the last day or so. And so will that line continue to move? Find out. Check it out at FanDuel. Get in on the action. Head on over to FanDuel.com today and make sure you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And guys, we're in basketball season. We're in football season. College football playoffs are going on. I think hockey, I don't keep up with hockey, but I'm sure hockey's going on. And if you're trying to get back into the arena or stadium, of course, our friends at Game Time are the perfect place for you. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and it's going to make getting tickets to see your favorite teams, whatever sport they play, even easier. They're going to filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And when you toggle the all-in prices feature on in the app, you won't have to worry about hidden fees at checkout. And we love what you see is what you get with the panoramic seat views also available with the Game Time app. So whether it's basketball, baseball, football, other sports, comedy, music, theater, whatever event is near you, Game Time is going to take the guesswork out of buying those tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So we are talking with your boy Q of Locked On Raiders, myself, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, talking about the big stories for the Las Vegas Raiders heading into this Week 15 matchup. And we sort of touched upon it a little bit at the top of the show, the potential Desmond Ridder revenge game. So Q, I know there's been a sort of back and forth this week and previous weeks on whether it's going to be Aidan O'Connell, whether it's going to be Desmond Ridder. Who can Falcon fans expect to see on Monday Night Football?
That's a great question. It really is. My gut tells me it's going to be Desmond Ridder, but also what I've seen and what I heard doesn't confirm that yet. And that's the biggest storyline when it comes to the Raiders and their offensive attack this week. And, for Aidan O'Connell, he left the game on Sunday versus Tampa Bay on a cart. He left the game on Sunday against Tampa Bay, not only on a cart, but in an air cast. So when you see that, you're like, okay, dunzo. He's done for the season, right? There's no coming back, especially with only a handful of games left. But Come to find out, it's only a bone bruise that he suffered. And I saw him walking around the facility on Wednesday. He hasn't ruled out that he's going to play on Monday. Desmond Ridder said he's ready to go. Desmond Ridder has been saying for the last few weeks he's ready to go if, in fact, that he has to go in at any time if the quarterback's not available. And it's wild because, Desmond Ridder was available when Gardner Minshew went down for the season. He said, yeah, I'm ready to go. Well, Aidan O'Connell came back from IR. So Desmond Ridder had to get pushed back another week. Now, all of a sudden, Aidan O'Connell goes down, and Desmond Ridder says, yeah, I'm ready, right? Went into the game. I'm ready to go. He might get pushed back again if Aidan O'Connell's ready to go. And, of course, O'Connell is trying to prove that he could be the franchise quarterback for the Raiders moving forward. So he wants to be in there as much as possible. He hasn't had a lot of opportunity with Scott Turner, the interim offensive coordinator, who, well, the offenses look better. The scoring hasn't really changed much, but the offenses look better. It makes more sense under Scott Turner than it did Luke Getsy. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm sure probably before the game on Monday, we'll know officially, is it going to be Ridder or if it's going to be Aidan O'Connell. Again, my gut feeling tells me it's going to be Ridder just because it seemed like a pretty tough injury and a bone bruise. I guess it's really about pain tolerance. I would kind of be shocked if Aidan O'Connell goes. I'm thinking that maybe Ridder goes this 1 week, and then maybe Aidan O'Connell, they go back to him if he's feeling better. But again, I'm not going to rule him out because I saw him walking around the facility. He went through a little bit of practice on Wednesday and just kind of let it be known that he's hoping to be able to get out there, but he just doesn't know. So that's really the $1 million question. If I had to put some money on it right now, if I had to go to FanDuel.com and put some money on it, I'd say that it's going to be Ridder, but I've been known to be wrong before. So it's kind of up in the air at this stage of the game, but it would make for a hell of a storyline, right? Desmond Ridder gets to face his former team in the Atlanta Falcons. And that was something he was excited about following the game on Sunday against Tampa Bay. Someone asked him immediately about, hey, well, next week is Atlanta. I know it's a little early to talk about it. He goes, yeah, no, I'm excited about it. Like he was already thinking. So the Falcons are already circled on his calendar. So he's ready to go into action if they do call on him. We just don't know if they're going to call on him as of yet.
And Desmond Ridder is a guy that is known to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. So I certainly think he is raring to go. And I know for me personally, obviously I'm maybe a little biased. I was a big supporter of Ridder heading into last year, and obviously it didn't work out in Atlanta. But I'd much rather play Aidan O'Connell than Desmond Ridder, just because I think his ability to make plays with his legs adds a different element to the equation, and the Falcons haven't really done a great job defending mobile quarterbacks this year. And I'm just curious from your perspective, Q, do you feel like one or the other quarterback gives the Raiders an advantage potentially in this game?
Yeah, I like Aidan O'Connell in this game because of his arm talent, but you're absolutely right about his legs, right? His legs aren't going to get it done, but Ridder's will. We know that Ridder is athletic enough to be able to get something done with his legs. Really, it's funny when the Raiders acquired him and signed him off the Cardinals practice squad, they actually had a package in place for him to go out there, even the next game and play. And then when they got to the red zone, they had brought him out there, but then it was like a false start or something, and it took him off the field. But they know what his athletic ability is. They know what he's able to bring to the table. So even if he doesn't start, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see Desmond Ridder in there in some kind of package. But honestly, Aidan O'Connell's connection that he has with Trey Tucker, he can stretch the field with him. He's got a really good connection with Brock Bowers, who's been fantastic. He's getting more lathered up with Big Mike, as Big Mike was out for a while, Michael Mayer, from week 3 to 11 with a personal issue. So now he's back. So Jacoby Myers, he already has a good relationship with the offensive line. He's starting to gel with again. So I think that for the Raiders, they would like to see Aidan O'Connell out there because he gives them the best opportunity to win. But I think that there's an element of Desmond Ridder in the conversation where they can use his athleticism to their advantage. Now, if he goes and starts the game, all bets are off, because I'll tell you right now, I haven't seen a lot as far as his arm talent. I haven't thought that it was that great. But he's a dude that if the protection breaks down, he can run around and pick up some yards. So it's going to be interesting, man, to see who's going to end up going out there. Either way you look at it, you're on your second or third quarterback of the season already, and that's never a recipe for success. And, well, the Raiders have only won 2 games, so they haven't been successful.
Yeah, and you talk about, 9-game losing streak.
Yeah.
Clearly, the Raiders are playing for the future at this point in time, and I imagine, there are maybe a couple of young bright spots in addition to, some of those young pieces like Brock Bowers and others on offense, maybe some young players that are emerging, maybe some players that you think could, have a coming out, I guess, maybe potentially against this Falcons offense on Monday night.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, number 28, and it's funny because number 28 used to be Josh Jacobs' number before he wore number 8 last year. Well, this is Sincere McCormick's number now, and he's a young man out of UTSA. He's been with the Raiders since 2022, but he's been injured. But I'll tell you, Aaron, he's been able to run the rock the last 3 games, and he is running with a purpose. I mean, he went for over 1,400 yards the last 2 years there at UTSA. His sophomore and junior year had double-digit touchdowns, and he's showing why right now. Again, he's only been playing in 3 games. He's been maxed out at 15 carries the last 2 games, and he hasn't got to 100 yards yet, but you can see that he has the potential to get there. I talked to him in the Raiders locker room on Wednesday. He said he's excited about his opportunity. The game is starting to slow down a little bit to him. He's figuring out how to stay on the field for all 3 downs as far as pass protection goes as well. Watch out for Sincere McCormick, man. He's a guy that is not trying to just prove to the Raiders that he's good to carry the rock the rest of the season, but also that he should be a future. He should be a future feature back for them. And I think he has the chops to do it. I think he has the ability to make that happen. He's just got to go out there and continue to grind. But he runs hard, man. He honestly, if you go back and look at some Josh Jacobs film, he runs similar to, and I don't want to say he is Josh Jacobs because those are some pretty big shoes to fill, but he runs similar to him. He's not the biggest dude. He's not the fastest dude, but man, he can run through tackles. He can spin on you. He'll break some tackles. He'll make it hard to get him down. And so I've really enjoyed what I've seen so far from Sincere McCormick. And the thing about him is he's not a guy that just runs for a yard, 2 yards, negative yard, 40-yard run. Like, he's not that guy. He's consistently 4 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards. He'll give you that consistent 4 yards and fall forward, right? So that's what you're really looking for in a really good back. So Sincere McCormick is the young dude offensively outside of Brock Bowers that I'd really pay attention to.
Okay. Yeah, I was impressed with what he did against Tampa Bay. And flipping to the defensive side of the ball, what should Falcon fans as well as Raider fans be, looking out for this week for this Raiders team heading into this Monday night matchup?
Yeah, I've been calling it evaluation season, so I've been really looking at some of these guys. You mentioned young guys. K'Lavon Chaisson is a guy I mentioned earlier in the show. The Raiders picked him up off of waivers from the Jaguars, former first-round pick. He's starting to come into his own. He's played about 11 games now with the Raiders. He has 3 sacks, had an interception last week. But he's starting to show his effectiveness and what made him a first-round pick of the Jaguars. And the Raiders are riddled with injury, especially on the defensive side of things. So he's really starting to step up and play a nice role. Adam Butler is not a household name, but he's a guy that's been forced into action in a more of a full-time basis since Christian Wilkins is on IR with a foot issue and he had to have surgery on his foot. So Adam Butler all of a sudden is out there quite a bit next to John Jenkins, but Butler is the guy that you'll see consistently in the backfield. So he's a guy to make sure that you pay attention to. He told us at training camp, hey, I want to be on the field all the time. I don't want to be just a third down specialist. I want to be on the field for 3 downs. And we said, why? And he said, well, to be honest, I'm going into a contract year, man. I want to get paid. He was real about it. I want to get paid. And right now he's earning a nice paycheck because he's been forced into action and out there in a full-time basis. He's a really good leader of the team as well. So he's the guy that I would definitely pay attention to in the middle of the Raiders defensive line. I don't have to tell you about Maxx Crosby. You already know about him. He's all that. And then he's a little bit more as well. And then you've got just kind of a cast of characters of guys, man. Trayvon Merrick in the back end, second-round pick, former of TCU. Really good players. He plays up near the line of scrimmage. You'll see him, rushing the quarterback a lot, trying to get in the backfield when the run plays. He shoots the gap quite a bit. So he's a really good player. He's fun to watch. And it's funny because the defense will keep the game close. And I know if you look at the scores, you look at the box score, you're like, oh, no, they got blowout, 28-13. It was 14-10 against the Falcons in the fourth quarter. And then, the wheels fell off, and, you see Desmond Ridder have to come in because Aidan O'Connell's out. But the defense finds ways to keep this game and these games close. They do a really good job. They gave up the first 2 drives to Tampa Bay last week, 14-0 out the gates. I was like, oh, man, it's going to be a blowout. They finally checked out, like it's a wrap. And then they held them to no points all the way to the fourth quarter. And then, like I said, the wheels fell off after that. But they're going to be a tough out. You can look at the scores and say, oh, man, they gave it 35. They gave it 40. I'm telling you, man, the defense is no pushover. So I know that the numbers don't look like it. I know the analytics don't tell you they are, but it is not an easy out, and I expect it to be a tough night on Monday Night Football at Allegiant Stadium for the Falcons and the Raiders. I think it's going to be a pretty fun game, even though, the records might not indicate that it's going to be a great game.
Yeah, I think you're right, Q, watching the film. I think this is going to be a pretty competitive game for, this team. maybe much to the chagrin of Falcon fans who are desperate for a sort of one-sided showing that we haven't seen from this team in several weeks. But that's going to get us to sort of keys to victory and what each team needs to do to emerge in a potential competitive game in order to slightly edge out their opponent to walk away with a victory. And we'll do that to wrap up today's Crossover Thursday. Today's Crossover Thursday is sponsored by Built Rewards. And if you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks and is completely free to join. You can earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem those points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. And you can access unique experiences that are just exclusive to Built members. Built makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. And if you're paying rent already, why not make it work for you? So start earning points on rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. And make sure you use our link so that they know we sent you at joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons with your boy Q of Locked On Raiders on a Crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks. Make sure you download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Q, let's talk about what each of these teams need to do to walk away with a win, otherwise known as keys to victory. What are 3 things that you think the Raiders need to do in order to snap their 9-game losing streak this Monday night?
Well, they've got to get to the quarterback. They've got to make Kirk Cousins' life miserable. He's not a guy that's going to run around the yard and escape, elude traffic and elude the pass rusher. So they've got to make his life miserable. They've got to force him into a couple bad throws. And as you know, he's turned the ball over quite a bit. So they need to do that as well. They need to find a way to create a couple turnovers. They had 3 last week against Tampa Bay. They're not very good at creating turnovers, but they've got to find a way to create some turnovers. So I think the pass rush and the turnovers kind of go hand in hand. Force Kirk Cousins to make a mistake. Also, they need to continue to feed Sincere McCormick. They need to continue to make sure that the running back is able to be him, the guy he is. I'd like to see him get around 20 carries. He hasn't been there yet in his NFL career. 15 has been the most. I'd like to see him get to around 20 carries and about 100 yards. He hasn't hit the 100-yard mark yet, but I'd like to see that. I think that the Raiders need that kind of balance. And then obviously get the ball to the playmakers, right? Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Big Mike, Michael Mayer. Those are the guys that need to get involved offensively. And it doesn't matter what your quarterback is. Desmond Ridder or Aidan O'Connell, doesn't matter. They've got to find a way to get the playmakers the ball. And then finally, they just got to protect the ball. They can't turn the ball over. I know it's a simple thing about the turnover battle. You lose the turnover battle, most of the time you're going to lose the game. But more times than not, the Raiders lose that turnover battle. So they've got to create some, and they've got to protect it. They can't give the ball away. If they do, they're setting themselves up for failure. They're putting that defense back on the field, which has happened so many times this year. The defense gets off the field. Last week, they got an interception. Chason comes down with the interception. The very next play, Aidan O'Connell fumbles the ball right back to Tampa Bay. The very next play. That's not winning football. That's losing football. You have to protect the rock, and you have to take the rock away. So do that, and you're giving yourself an opportunity. We'll see how it all plays out. There's a reason why the Raiders are on a 9-game losing streak, and we still got to see who the quarterback's going to be. But get the ball to the playmakers. Have Sincere McCormick run the rock. Create a couple turnovers and get a couple turnovers of your own, and you'll be okay. You'll give yourself a chance. That's as far as I'm concerned what the Raiders need to do. So when you look at the Falcons, what do they need to do?
Well, we'll start with turnovers. That's one of the things, right? They've turned the ball over a bunch this year. They got to stop that this week, and that starts with Kirk Cousins. As you mentioned, both of these teams have struggled with this. They're both at the bottom of the league in turnover margin. The Raiders are dead last. The Falcons are 28th. The Raiders are dead last in takeaways. But as you said, Tampa Bay turned the ball over 3 times, and they got lucky because, as you said, O'Connell, botched one of those turnovers. They did turn the second one into points, and then the third turnover came right before the half, so they didn't really have an opportunity to turn that into points. But if the Falcons do that, I don't think they're going to get so lucky in those circumstances, and that has shot them in the foot really badly over this last month. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they got to get off to a fast start. I've been saying it all season long. And a couple of weeks ago, I would quote the stats on these crossovers like, oh, they're 5-1 when they score 7 points or more in the first quarter. And then they've scored 7 points or more in the last 2 games, and they lost both of those games. So I'm going to flip it with a different stat. Basically, The Falcons are dead last in the NFL right now in fourth quarter points. So basically, if it comes down to a 1-score game where they need to score in the fourth quarter, they can't do it this year. And so they need to get off to that fast start just so they can just not have it come down to the fourth quarter, because this offense has really struggled. So get that early lead, lean on the Falcons run game, force the Raiders to sort of have to throw the ball and play from behind. And maybe that pass rush that has been resurgent these last couple of weeks can get home and create some stops against Desmond Ridder or Aidan O'Connell. And then the third thing is whoever's going to win in the red zone is going to probably win this game, right?
Yeah,
both of these teams have been bad offensively and defensively in the red zone. The Falcons on offense and red zone efficiency are 26th. The Raiders are 28th. On defense, the Falcons are 24th. The Raiders are 25th. So both of these teams are equally bad in terms of red zone. And so basically probably that one extra red zone conversion that winds up team A or team B scores a touchdown versus a field goal is probably going to decide the outcome of this game, because I'm expecting sort of a close game in this one. But those to me are sort of the 3 keys for the Falcons. Don't lose the turnovers, get off to a fast start, and get touchdowns instead of settling for field goals if and when you get to the red zone.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. And you can just, fast forward those and put those keys to the Raiders side of things as well, right? I mean, they have the same struggles. Again, like I mentioned, there's a reason why they're a 2-11 team right now, riding a 9-game losing streak. There's a lot of areas that need to be cleaned up. But, the fourth quarter not scoring from the Falcons, that might help out the Raiders, because the Raiders seem to let the game get out of control in the fourth quarter. So maybe if the Falcons struggle to score in the fourth quarter, that'll assist the Raiders. Or maybe on the flip side, maybe the Falcons will get cooking in the fourth quarter because the Raiders start to let the floodgates open. So, one of these two things could be true. We don't know what it is, but one of these two things could be true for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, Q. As I was looking up a lot of the stats for this matchup, it feels a lot like a very movable force against a very stoppable object, and one team will go either way with these two teams. So we'll see what's what on Monday Night Football. We'll see if Desmond Ridder gets his revenge. We'll see if Kirk Cousins can get off of this slump. But we thank each and every one of you to check out today's crossover Thursday on Locked On Falcons, Locked On Raiders. And for your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On NFL, 2 shows daily. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland, kicking you off each morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with our guy, Tony Wiggins, for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.